Welcome back to Brashonomics here on our Thanksgiving week show here in just a couple days. We're discussing some things to be thankful about, and the real estate market in Seattle certainly is one of them, but something that some people maybe aren't thankful about because you watch a lot of news and maybe you just don't like the term fiscal cliff because it doesn't sound very good. That may just be something is on your mind because, well, it's on the minds of a lot of TV watchers. In fact, I think it covers just about every news station, every financial station, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. But there's some things you may need to care about in that you're not getting from the fear that is being placed by the CNNs and Foxes of the world. Dennis Gibb joins us again, president of Sweetwater Investments with nearly $1.4 billion in assets under management. First of all, welcome back, Dennis. How are you?
Good, Ben. Thanks. Good to be here. I don't know if you heard this. There was some breaking news on the way down here. Bill Clinton has asked Paula Broadwell to write his biography.
That is a bad idea.
Yeah, bad idea, but Hillary had nothing to say about it.
Sure.
So, anyway.
Well, Dennis, outside of the other news stories that are going on, the other stuff that doesn't matter.
Yeah.
The whole thing, this whole thing of everybody caring who's sleeping with who and people having to step down is mind blowing.
I just think it's fun myself.
You get the
it's
Twitter
hilarious.
feeds of it,
here you got 2 4-star generals, screwing around with a Kim Kardashian lookalike. Obviously, these 2 generals let their privates make their decisions.
That is true. Okay, Dennis, let's get back. Let's get back on track here, buddy.
I thought that was a track. You said humorous twist.
You got the humorous twist. You did without a doubt. And when you got to. And but what's interesting is we're talking about the fiscal cliff, which is a huge news story, and people should be worried about that versus maybe the generals, which I guess is more of the intermittent love story that that just tweaks people's minds and have to know what's happening. Yeah. Let's get more into the fiscal cliff, though, so we don't turn into a gossip show. What do you think?
I don't care.
You don't care. You're open either way. Excellent.
It's your show, Ben.
Excellent. Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, your ratings have already taken a hit by having me on here, so let's get started.
Well, Dennis, let's knock this out of the park here because the fiscal cliff is something that everybody looks at. It's almost impossible to really understand what it is by watching the 30-second news clips here and there, and the amount of fear that people try to place into your heart as a TV watcher, as a media viewer, simply because that's how they're keeping their ratings. What are some big things? What is the fiscal cliff, first of all?
Okay, the fiscal cliff is somewhat misnamed, but this is one of those things that you're right, the press has come up with as a way of scaring people. They love to make people's skin crawl and this sort of thing. The fiscal cliff was occasioned because it's the expiration of a series of tax cuts and other changes in government revenues that were made years ago and then had a sunset provision in them so that they would go off at a certain time. And that time has now come. And it has come coincidental with a huge recession and a lot of people unemployed and this sort of thing. And normally you don't want to increase taxes when you have a recession. It just doesn't seem to work very well. That's what Herbert Hoover found out about. So the fiscal cliff is when all these things expire, and they all expire on the 1st of January.
And then the whole sky, we go off a cliff.
Well, yeah, we do and we don't. If nothing's done, we will go off a cliff. We will have a lot of taxes go up. For example, there's a thing called the alternative minimum tax, which does not just affect rich people. They put a patch on it where they exclude income from it. And right now, the patch is somewhere in the $47,000 range. Last year, it was $77,000. Now, Congress must act by the end of the year to increase that patch, or a lot of people, 27 million Americans, are going to find themselves paying 28% tax on $30,000 of additional income. And that's going to be a big hit for a lot of people. And you don't have 27 million people is not the 1%.
But still, that's not a cliff. You don't pay your 2012 tax or 2013 taxes on January 1st of 2013.
No, but you're going to have less money if these tax increases go through. First of all, there's a payroll tax cut that went in as part of the stimulus plan. That goes off on January 1st. It means everybody who gets a check from their employer is going to get 2% less. starting
which starts to hurt.
Starts to hurt. It could be substantial, especially if you're in the $50,000 and under range. That's the first thing. The second thing is that if you have the bad luck to die on January 2nd of 2013 and nothing's done, and you have assets of more than $1 million, you're looking at an estate tax on that money of about 47%. So that's another thing, and everybody who owns a business, is over that $1 million range. Right now it's $5 million, but it goes back to $1 million on January at midnight.
Well, not everybody owns a business, but a lot of people have $1 million.
Well, most people who own a business, if you value the business, it'll be worth your whole estate will be worth more than $1 million.
I guess including your house and everything. Yeah.
Exactly right. Exactly.
So why? Okay, so there's some increase in taxes. Are there other increases in taxes?
Well, there's a whole bunch of them. I mean, they're talking about right now qualified dividends get taxed at 15%. Capital gains get taxed at 15%. The brackets have been reduced. All of these would go off, and 15% dividend tax would go up to 33%, which is effectively a double in taxes, and that's going to affect people's investment decisions.
And so as people have to I guess, from the tax perspective, there's still, I guess, time, right? I mean, people can still make different decisions over the course of the next, 35, 40 days or whatever it is?
Right. You've got up until January 30 or December 31st to make your decisions about what you're going to do. What really is the danger of this whole thing is the lack of certainty. Markets can adjust to risk. You can adjust to the risk of war, or they adjust to this. What they cannot adjust to is uncertainty. And what this does is create a huge amount of uncertainty in people's minds, and it creates an uncertainty about whether you want to hire people, whether you want to expand your business or not, because you don't know what your tax rates are. And if you don't know what your tax rates are, you'll never know what your rates of return on your capital are, and so people will basically just sit on their hands. That's the risk of the fiscal cliff, is that you just have a total freeze up of the economy because of lack of certainty.
We did coming from the mortgage side of things, we did a whole video on the fiscal cliff and what it means for mortgage rates.
Oh, yeah.
Mortgage rates could go down dramatically because all the money could again come out of the stock market and start going to the safe havens of something like mortgage-backed securities.
Well, there's no doubt mortgage rates are not going to go up in this, because the Federal Reserve Board has made a commitment that they're going to keep rates down.
$40 billion a month.
$40 billion a month in mortgage securities, and the chairman is speaking today in New York, and we don't know what he's going to say, but
I'm sure it'll be dissected.
It'll always be interesting, and of course nobody will understand it even after he says it. So I think that man speaks a different language than all of us. But anyway, probably Klingon. They're going to talk about that, but mortgage rates, people who are buying houses should have nothing to fear with this. In fact, buying a house may actually be beneficial if this thing doesn't get resolved, because if the tax rate goes up and they leave the exemption for mortgage interest, in fact, that tax deduction for that mortgage interest will mean more to you if you're paying taxes at 33% than if you're paying taxes at 25%.
Sure, I mean, and that's simply because you're going to be taking a lot more off the top.
Right. Well, if you're deducting 33% of your income of your interest, that's more than 25%, unless you live in Tukwila.
You love Tukwila, don't you?
Oh, it's a great place. What's in Tukwila? Furniture stores and a Wendy's. Come on.
Oh, Dennis Gibb joins us, president of Sweetwater Investments. So, Dennis, you have these tax cuts. Now, you also, the one piece that a lot of people don't understand, you also have a huge deduction in spending.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, in all across the board, really.
Well, there's a thing called sequestration, which part of the budget deal a couple years ago to raise the debt ceiling was automatic spending cuts that were going to go into effect. The most dramatic is that the Defense Department will realize a $50 billion cut day one, and it's $50 billion a year for the next 10 years. Somehow that doesn't seem like a good idea right now. But, who knows? But there's other cuts across the board. And remember that 71% of the federal budget is what are called entitlements, and they are virtually untouchable. That's Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid.
And those are pre-spent. I mean, the new done. Congress, new Senate, same president, nobody can make changes to that.
No, and so you only have 30% roughly of the budget that can be cut. And so you're asking that 30% to somehow address a $1 trillion a year budget deficit and $16 trillion worth of debt. I'm sorry, that math just doesn't work.
Now, what's interesting, what I find interesting is a lot of people have talked about the balanced budget, right? We want a balanced budget. And in some ways, if this were to go down and the government, which there's no way they will, I mean, really, this is just going and creating a new budget. But if they will, you would have a pretty quickly balanced budget, or close to.
Sure.
But that would be, maybe explain why that would be such a bad idea.
Well, because you'd be deflating the economy. A lot of people, if you take the spending out, a lot of that money goes to people, and it goes into spending. It goes into buying food or cars or whatever. There's a lot of supplements out there. The Defense Department, they may be wasteful, but they spend a lot of money. And there's a lot of places like Southern California that do very well off defense. If that stuff starts getting cut back, then the rest of the economies around there start to shrink. There's an expansion factor. They say that every job created by wage-paying job creates 4 new jobs someplace else. So reverse that. If you suddenly start cutting back your jobs, you're going to reverse.
And these are, I mean, to put it bluntly, these are military jobs that may be cut back. This is military wages that may be cut back.
This is people who are making satellites for Lockheed. These are people who are making airplanes and this kind of thing, and doing all kinds of other work. And suddenly, and the people who support them, are the guy who runs the local 7-Eleven, the cab driver or whatever who drives these guys back and forth to work. They lose their jobs too because people aren't there to pay for it. So a balanced budget is a wonderful idea. It's a wonderful long-term goal. But the idea of doing it in a rush like this, all you got to do is look at what's going on in Greece right now, and you'll see what happens when you start trying to balance a budget quickly.
Well, and if you look at some of the things that the items people are so willing to cut, they are a follicle of hair on an entire body. I mean, they're nothing, and they're these emotional pieces that PBS or whatever it may be, and it's nothing.
There's plenty of room out there to cut. I mean, we've got. I don't know if you know this now. We have something called the Helium Board in the federal government, and the Helium Board's job is to make sure that the Navy has enough helium to fill its blimps.
Really?
Yes.
I didn't even know the Navy flew blimps anymore.
Not since the Akron crashed off the Pacific coast in 1933.
Wow.
They don't have blimps anymore. We also have a thing called a mohair board, which is designed to make sure we have enough mohair for military uniforms. That started in World War I.
Mohair?
Mohair.
What's mohair?
I have no idea, but that's what they call it. And I don't think we use mohair anymore for anything.
Well, Dennis, I don't know what mohair is, but maybe we'll figure that out here by the end of the show. We do have to go to break, but I do want to cover this. You talk a little bit about. I think this is not necessarily a fiscal cliff. This is the
slope.
Elected officials going in and have to do something.
Yeah. Which is so unusual for them.
Right, and they have kind of a deadline, and they have to figure something out. That'll be a whole new process for them.
They'll eventually kick part of it down the road because it's too painful for them to do anything else. And you got to remember, these are people who've been buying votes with government, with your and my money. So, they're not going to give that up right away.
So what do you think then, if you start looking at what the government may be able to do, which probably isn't solve this thing with a silver bullet over the course of the next whatever days? Where is the solution?
Well, the solution is much longer term, and it's much more dangerous than we want to talk about. We have to totally rethink the tax code in this country. We have to rethink the relationship of the recipients of government spending and to the taxpayers. We have to address the fact that there is inequity in the tax system, and that some people. I mean, listen, there's no reason in the world that a hedge fund manager should make $1 billion a year and pay 15% tax on it. It just shouldn't happen. Nobody making $5 million a year adjusted gross income needs Social Security. We need a means test on these things. We need to get real about what we're spending here, and we need to broaden out the tax base. We need to get more people paying taxes, and we need to make it fairer. And we need to start looking at some of these entitlement programs and decide whether or not we want to continue to do this. Well,
you talk about the tax code, and the one number that gets me that has been there, I believe, probably since the mohairs and the blimps, is this $250,000 a year is what makes you extremely wealthy in this country. And I that number was created, I think, in like 1920s.
I think that number was created out of thin air. I mean,
but 80, 90 years ago.
Oh yeah, it's useless. And you think about a person who has a subchapter S corporation like I do. You're going to fall above that $250,000 level immediately because you're consolidating all your corporate income. And there's a lot of people out there who would be really unhappy if the maximum tax bracket were set at $250,000.
Dennis, we do have to go to break. Thanks so much for joining us. Always a pleasure. Stick around. We'll chat a little bit more at the end of the show. You're listening to Brassionomics. We'll be right back with Aubrey Cohen, Seattle PI.